The second area that we draw on for the foundations of this course is classical computation. However, we will only need a few very basic concepts, such as those of a bit and a gate. And besides fixing these notions, this will provide us with some very useful context to understand what we can gain from a quantum mechanical approach. We will first cover some very general aspects. Then have a look at the binary representation and manipulation of information. And finally, briefly discuss the complexity of computational tasks. In terms of very general aspects, the goal of a computation is to take some input and transform it into some output by processing the input systematically and in the typical computer this involves a processing unit and some memory devices and within the CPU you would typically have a control unit an arithmetic and logical unit, and also some dedicated memory already, which takes the form of registers. And these are all communicating with each other. And the memory you could further break down into instructions and data. This is essentially the so-called von Neumann architecture of a computer. Now, the strength of this architecture is that it is very flexible. It can be used to solve very general types of problems. And in particular, this is because these computers are programmable. And they also use a very universal paradigm to represent the input and output information, namely as digital information. And this allows them to carry out very general tasks, only limited by the complexity of the task as well as the capacity of the system, which drives the considerations in the design of these systems, basically concerning their speed, the available memory, as well as the power consumption. So these are the three areas in which advances are generally most noticeable, for instance as a consumer. Over many decades, first with the clock speed of the CPU, and nowadays more in terms of the number of cores that are available and the number of tasks that the CPU can carry out in parallel. The increase in memory, both in terms of data storage and involved in the computations, is very noticeable over the last decades. And power consumption we are concerned with almost every day when we recharge our phones and tablets. Next, we are going to have a look at one of these aspects in a bit more detail, namely at the digital or specifically binary representation of information.